Welcome to this this new normal. I'm Michael Lamb, and we are today releasing the city's comprehensive annual financial report. We'll take questions at the end. I hope everyone's safe. I hope you're getting used to wearing one of these whenever you're out and about, and keeping everyone else safe as well. The city, we are taking a look here at 2019. I know there are a lot of questions about what's going on in 2020, and we'll try to get to some of that. Fact is, at this point in the year, we don't have a lot of great information, but we'll share with you what we have after we go over last year. We're talking about fiscal year 2019, which ended on December 31st. And for the city, we had a very positive year. But let me first go into where we can go to where money goes and where it comes from. And as you can see, this is a look at our taxes. You can see where our tax money comes from. This hasn't changed much for the last number of years. Real estate being our number one tax source, followed by earned income, and those two taxes again. Real estate performing as expected, earned income doing a little better than we expected last year, and generating more revenue for the city because we had a pretty good year last year. And then you can see where our money goes. And this is all included in on page Roman numeral number 9 in the CAFR itself. So if you have the PDF, you can take a look at that. And you can see here, and I'm gonna get back to this when we talk about 2020, 55% of everything that we spend goes to public safety. And so when you start thinking about, if we're in a position because of what's likely to be a fiscal crisis moving forward, what kind of cuts can be made. And, the last thing I think you want to think about cutting during a pandemic is public safety. So it really limits what we're going to be able to do on the expenditure side when we sit down and really talk about what happens in 2020 moving forward. But for 2019, let's start with the big number that everyone wants to know about. And the fact is that in 2019, the city, after taking in its revenue and expending its expenditures, ended up with a surplus of $20 million, $20.7 million more than we spent last year. That increased our fund balance, or what we call the rainy day fund sometimes, the unassigned fund balance, to $133 million. That's basically our savings account. That's a very strong number. It's a strong number for a city with a budget of our size. The recommendation is often that you have, some would say as low as 5%, some say 10. We are a bit above 20% of our budget in fund balance. So we ended the year in a very strong position, and that may be necessary given what we have moving forward. This is a look at what's going on. You can see this over time, how the fund balance has grown, particularly in the last 6 or 7 years, as the city has come out of its recovery, out of Act 47, and generating these kind of surpluses over the last few years for the city. I want to go into a couple specific areas of revenue that we talk about in almost every year, and particularly highlight this. This is your earned income tax collection, as you can see over time. And you can see that 2019 was a particularly strong year, that we were able to bring in a significant revenue, which says that people are working, that incomes are up. And I think really the second part of that is probably the more important part, the fact that incomes are up. Because when we take a look at the next category, which is our local services tax, we'll show you that we had a little bump in the number of employment in 2018, and we're back to kind of where we were for the several years prior at the revenue that comes in. Now this is a calculation of that $52 tax that is charged to anyone who works in the city of Pittsburgh. So you can see that while incomes are up because the wage tax is up, the number of jobs actually is not up over time. That blip in 2018, we think may have been more of a recording thing, or a calculation of some of our seasonal work and showing that number as high as it was. We actually had to do some refunds on some of that as well. So you can see over the last few years, other than 18, it's a pretty stagnant number. So if jobs aren't growing, but the wage tax is growing, what that tells you is that incomes are up. So it points to what we've known anecdotally is that it's that in the city of Pittsburgh, jobs of higher income are here. People, net income is growing. Our median income is growing. So it's a good problem. It's a good situation, but it does make you wonder about what's happening at the lower end of the economy as we move forward in Pittsburgh. So and then the other thing we want to show is just some of the taxes that we've had this year. We had a drop in amusement tax last year, an increase in parking. Pretty much stable, pretty stable numbers year over year between all of these tax categories. That's obviously going to change in 2020, particularly for some of these categories. And then if you want to move on to the three issues that we always talk about, or a couple issues that we always talk about. First off, our bonded debt. We talked a lot about in 2012 and in 2013, going back how much of our budget went to debt and to pay debt and to our total debt. And you can see that we kind of we really had our debt cliff a couple of years ago. And now we are back in a position where we're regularly borrowing. So our debt is increasing. It's increasing in a responsible way. We're still significantly lower than we were, and within the guidelines as suggested by the Act 47 team and now codified into city code as to what percentage we should have and how much we should be borrowing. We're on a much more responsible borrowing path now. And so we're able to begin to have a stronger capital program. We're able to increase the capacity of our capital program so that we're able to really address a lot of the deferred maintenance of our infrastructure around the city, and that's beginning to happen. Obviously, financial situations today may change that, but we were really getting off to a pretty good start in 2019 in starting to address some of our long-term infrastructure maintenance issues. And then the other thing we'll talk a lot about is our pension. This is a look at the invested portfolio of our pension fund, and you can see how well that's done over the last few years. We had a very strong year in 2019. We are now over $500 million. That's just in the invested portfolio. That's not counting the parking asset side of the pension fund. So the fact that we have been over the last few years been able to continue to grow that portfolio the way we have, and of course a lot of that is because of market performance, but it's also because we've been investing more in it. That's really put us in a much stronger position. I would venture to guess that number is lower today than it was on December 31st, given what's happened in the market in the first part of this year. But I feel pretty strongly that over time that will also correct. It's just a matter of how long that's going to take. But again, from where we were, when I started here 12 years ago to where we are today, it's a significantly improved situation in our pension plan, and it's something that's very good to see. That's the last of the slides that I have to show you. So I'll open up for questions in a minute, but let me just talk a little bit about 2020. Obviously, the pandemic hit in the later part of March. So first quarter numbers would not fully show the impact of what's going on in the city right now. But even with what we have in first quarter numbers, we're seeing a drop. Now we're seeing a significant drop in revenue to the city. We're not prepared to put a number on that right now. But I certainly understand and support the mayor's position on this in reaching out to the federal government to talk about some program for municipalities across this country, particularly in the revenues that we've lost. And let's talk a little bit about that, because there are revenues that are lost, and then there are revenues that are delayed. Some revenues we will get back. For some revenues for services, some revenues for permits, some of that will come back this year. But revenues in things like parking, revenues for things like amusements, for concerts and sporting events, we're not going to have those. And when we finally do get back to when we can have those, I think you're going to see a different model where fewer people are going to be involved in those activities. And so it's going to have a dramatic impact on those revenues. So I support what the mayor said last week and the letter that he sent to the president, asking them to address this shortfall that cities across the country are going to have. And I'll close there. I do want to say this. This has been a particularly difficult time. And I want to acknowledge Hadiza Buhari, our chief accounting officer, and her staff, who, despite some very difficult times, despite the difficulties in teleworking and in some days having to be here in the building, we were still able to get this report out by the 1st of May, which has always been our goal. And we're able to provide this information in a more timely way to the citizens of Pittsburgh. So I want to thank the accounting staff for the work that they did, particularly under these very difficult circumstances. So with that, I think we're going to open up the mics to folks in the media who are in the Zoom session here, and we'll begin to take questions.